to introduce our speaker for today. So we have Dan McKay from, and Dan, I hope I got that right now.
Mackie, that's okay.
Mackie, I'm sorry.
That's
I knew
right.
I was going to do that after I even asked you.
Trust me, I've been called worse. No worries.
And he is from Green Mountain Power, and he's going to be sharing some incentives and programs that Green Mountain Power offer for homeowners and small businesses. So I'm going to turn this right over to Dan.
Great, thank you very much. I've worked for Green Mountain Power in the electric utility world for about 30 years, in which it's very refreshing now to be in the energy transformation world. And I think Act 56 that was signed by Governor Shumlin a few years ago really put a good spin on things, headed in the right direction to reduce fossil fuel by 90% by 2050. And which one of the things he did is he didn't make us as individuals here in the beautiful state of Vermont responsible for reducing fossil fuel. He made the electric utilities responsible for that. So that's the reason why Efficiency Vermont, who trucks on the line as well, and Green Mountain Power both have some really good incentives to help folks eliminate fossil fuels and become much more comfortable in their homes. So with that, if anybody has any questions at this point in time, I'd love to go to the PowerPoint presentation and kind of walk through it. And Jim Hand, it's always a pleasure to have you. I wish I knew you were going to be on the call, but I'm going to have to start paying you to actually talk about some of the things that we've done at Riley Rink. And I'm only kidding, I won't pay you, but. So let's see. There we go. So it's interesting in the fact that, you know, energy transformation, a lot of folks think about things in a different manner, in which, you know, personally, I grew up during the muscle car era, in which I would have never thought today I'd be driving a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, in which people can change and their mindset can change, in which it's very interesting to see and also very refreshing in many respects. So I think everyone knows a little bit about Green Mountain Power, and I'm very glad to see a good mix of folks scattered throughout the southern part of the state of Vermont, in which, when I say that, my role is actually Innovation Champion is my job title, and which I cover from Route 4 south, border to border, Massachusetts, New York, and New Hampshire, and Green Mountain Power service territory. So with that being said, commercial and industrial visits, as well as occasional customer visits and businesses in general, are what I focus the majority of my time on. And, you know, as you can see from the map, I'm not going to really read the slide, but I mean, it tells you a little bit about us and what we cover and what we're all about. So think about the fact that, you know, many folks say climate change isn't real. Well, unfortunately, I would disagree with them. And when I say that, when was the last time we had 3 heat waves of 90 degrees plus in 1 month? You know, it's amazing that time and fossil fuel consumption, as well as pollution, has actually impacted the environment to the point that our winters aren't quite as harsh as they used to be, which we have some swings, temperature swings, which that's all part of the climate change. And then we also have probably one of the hottest summers that I personally remember growing up as a kid in the state of Vermont so far, in which the dog days of August haven't even gotten here yet. So with that, we've had a lot of major storms, in which we've been pretty fortunate recently that we haven't had many more. We've had a few not widespread storms, but some minor storms. And a lot of that, I think, is driven by climate change, because I remember being in the utility industry in the mid-90s, in which we might have a storm a year. Now it seems like we have at least a storm a month or one every other week. And it's truly driven by climate change. Some interesting facts, I don't know if you knew that or not, but currently our electric portfolio is 94% carbon free and 63% renewable, in which by 2030, we're headed there to be 100% renewable and 100% carbon free by 2025. So various sectors that we can actually help folks and incentivize them: transportation, personal electric vehicles, and fleet vehicles. I mean, actually working with the Bennington Transit, Marble Valley Transit, and there's a couple schools that will actually be getting electric buses in which they actually receive the grants for, in which Green Mountain Power can provide them with some Tier 3 money, which came out of Act 56, to actually support the reduction of fossil fuel and allow them to be able to afford the buses. Electric forklifts, we also have incentives for those as well. And we also have incentives for workplace and public EV charging, which there are a few of those scattered throughout the state, in which there's actually a map on our website that shows where those charge stations are. Heating, heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, geothermal. I mean, we have some really lucrative incentives, as well as Efficiency Vermont, for many, many different forms of heat pumps, whether it be air to water, air to air, and what other flavors can you think of, Chuck, that I should mention? I'll put you on the spot for a moment, Chuck. Or are you going to be silent?
Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to unmute. Yes, we work hand in hand with Green Mountain Power these days in the advent of Tier 3. We are essentially both in the efficiency business now, which is great. There's a lot of staff that we have with deep expertise. We have rebates for a lot of categories, and where we don't have rebates, GMP has rebates. So we work pretty much hand in glove these days.
So Dan, we actually have two questions.
Yes.
One question is from Catherine, and she asks, are all of these incentives equally available to individuals as well as businesses?
So yes and no. And when I say that, there are rebates for homeowners that are off-the-shelf standard rebates. Businesses, on the flip side, we have to look at that a little differently, and quite often we'll end up writing custom projects. And when I say that, a custom project, and I'll give a good example, Riley Rink. Jim Hand, if you would want to talk a little bit about what we've done with Riley Rink and what we did from the standpoint of heat pumps and actually provided a custom incentive, I would greatly appreciate it. Otherwise, these poor folks are going to have to listen to me for the entire time.
I can try to do it quickly. Riley Rink is a skating facility in Manchester, Vermont. We used about 22,000 gallons of propane a year, and our electric bill was around 350,000, or not in dollars, but 350,000 kilowatt hours a year. With Dan's help and Efficiency Vermont, we decided to go away from propane heating and put in 6 air-to-air heat pumps. The only difference that we did was that we, instead of drawing energy out of the air outside the building, we took the energy over the ice surface and put it into our warm areas. So that this did a couple of things. One is obviously give us climate control, heating and cooling in the summer, but it also kept the air over our ice surface at a nice steady cool 35 degrees or so. And that allowed our compressors to run that make the ice about half the time that they used to. So we went from 22,000 gallons of propane down to 3,000 gallons a year. And our electric consumption went from 350,000 kilowatt hours to about 295,000 kilowatt hours. And it was all to their help.
Awesome project. So did that answer the question? Or
I think so. I think maybe you'll...
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The other question, and this is one that I had, can you briefly touched on this, but I was thinking about this, say, in terms of heat pumps. You all offer incentives for homeowners to get a heat pump, and there are some incentive programs that you offer for that. Efficiency Vermont also offers incentives for something like heat pumps, and how do those two programs work in tandem, or are they works very separately?
They actually work kind of hand in hand. And when I say that, Efficiency Vermont's incentive is actually point of purchase. So they're actually, when your installer goes and purchases a heat pump at whatever distributor, they're actually going to receive the incentive from Efficiency Vermont at that point. Plus there's an additional $100 at the point of purchase from Green Mountain Power. After the purchase, it used to be after the install, but because of the fact that the contractors got so backed up, I mean, there are people who bought heat pumps now that probably won't see them installed until September or October. So we actually changed it to after the purchase. We actually have a incentive form on our website that you can fill out and send in for the $800 rebate. The biggest caveat there is the product must be on the NEEP approved list, which is New England Energy Partnership. Is that correct, Chuck? Did I get that correct?
I think it's Energy Efficiency Partnership. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But if it's on the NEEP approved list, and our rebate for the $800 is for mini split ductless systems only. We've actually had a few folks that tried to go ducted, in which there's actually other rebates from Efficiency Vermont for the ducted systems as well, and then air to water and so on. Any other questions? Okay, commercial and industrial. I'll give you a real cool example that happened in a college in southern Vermont. They were actually using propane to preheat the hot water for their electric dishwasher. So we actually put in an electric booster, and we cut down about 5,000 gallons of propane, in which we were capable of 90% funding that booster just through the reduction of the fossil fuel consumption. So, I mean, it's kind of, to Chuck's point earlier, it's kind of like the sky's the limit. And, you know, I'd much rather have you folks reach out and say, hey, I think this might work. Here's an opportunity. I'd rather give it a sniff test and say, yes, we can help, or find out later, geez, we could have helped. Because the way everything's written is we need to be part of helping you make the decision to change. And if you already decided to change, then we really can't help you there. But on the flip side, if we can provide some financial incentive that would actually make you make that move from fossil fuel to electrification or fuel switching, then we can typically provide some real decent incentive. And Riley Rink is probably one of my better examples. You know, and think outside of the box. We also have a couple sawmills that used to be 100% running diesel generators, one of them to the tune of 43,000 gallons of diesel fuel a year. We actually were capable of providing 90% of the funding to put a 4-mile, 3-phase line extension in for the customer. And now they're actually running 100% on electricity. And we also have what's called a curtailment rate, in which I could get into that a little bit more in depth, but I'd love to talk. I think I may confuse people if I start talking about curtailment right now, but that actually helps the customer avoid that traditional demand charge that you would see if you're a rate 65 or rate 63 customer with Power Factor. And all these projects that I've mentioned, Efficiency Vermont has been there hand in hand with us. So residential energy comparison, you know, I could talk about this a lot, but on the flip side, I would just as soon have you folks kind of look at it, digest it, and feel free to ask any questions. It actually compares electricity to most of your types of heating oils. Heating fuels, I should say, not oils. You will notice that natural gas is not there. Natural gas is very difficult to compete with because it's very inexpensive, but I don't think there's any natural gas in southern Vermont.
Could you just say something about the figures, like compared to electricity, 3%, what does that mean?
Same question.
So right, so with oil at $2.27, it's actually a savings of 3% going with electricity. If you actually have oil at $2, you're actually going to be in the hole 10% roughly. Does that explain?
So cheap oil is more expensive by 10%?
No. Cheap oil is saving you an additional 10%. So actually it's going to cost you 10% more to electrify with oil at $2 a gallon. So if you're buying oil at $2.27 a gallon, it's going to make sense. You're going to actually see a 3% return on your investment if you electrify. And I don't think fossil fuel prices will stay where they are. I mean, we've seen that roller coaster ride over the years in which today it's one thing, next year it's totally different. And think about it when we were around $4 or $5 a gallon for gasoline a few years ago, which electricity is very, very stable from the standpoint of price point. And with the exception of Mother Nature and impacting us, most of the time you have it when you need it.
So if I understand this, it's kind of a hard sell, you know, on one hand, but
Well,
I mean,
it
we're
is.
not going with fossil fuels at all in our project.
It's only a hard sell also if you put no value on getting rid of the damage from fossil fuels.
Right.
Carbon.
So the capitalists are going to buy oil until it's cheaper to buy electricity.
Which, you know, the way that oil prices have been going, that probably won't be too long before we go back to those directions. You know, I think we're in a lower spike right now, or a lower dip right now, but it's certainly much more variable, as Dan mentioned. And
Well, the
prices
other
go up
part
and
was,
down.
if I understand that most of the electric power in Vermont is from renewables.
63% is currently.
And does renewables include biomass, so-called?
Yes.
There's been some horrifying film about that.
Little safer than nuclear, which we don't have any of that. So life is good. Anything else on this slide?
I'm going to follow up on that question. I'm just curious about, you know, the biofuels as well, and they're a necessity right now. But I'm curious about how Green Mountain Power views those in terms of their progression forward, if possible. You know, what are their priorities in terms of renewables?
Our priorities, for the most part, are to put in as much solar as we possibly can and actually harness that with battery backup, so that we can actually create a bunch of microgrids. And ideal situation would be is if we have a storm in, you're in Putney, Catherine. So if we have a storm in Putney, maybe we don't have to send linemen out in the middle of the night to actually put your power on. Maybe we can isolate that through a microgrid, and actually allow you to ride it through so that we can actually control our own expenses a little bit and send the crews out there during the daytime.
Yeah.
Will we see that 10 years from now? Possibly. Will we see it tomorrow? Probably not.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, having that redundance out there with the solar and the battery backup, you can actually do a couple things. One, we can provide an island or a microgrid out there. Two, we actually have some means of pulling energy during peak demands out of those batteries. So instead of having to buy spot market power, we can actually utilize those batteries, in which that's what we do with the Powerwall program and the Bring Your Own Device battery device program for residential, which we actually pay a little bit of an incentive to actually do that. And ideal situation would be to get to the point that Vermont is a power producer as opposed to a power consumer, and actually be able to export power out of Vermont as opposed to import power into Vermont.
So on a microcosm, if I can ask another question, just as an individual, I have solar, and I do have an interest in having my own battery for the same reasons, you know, just to be independent, and I'm wondering where you see, you know, coming forth in the future, any kind of incentives for battery packs.
Well, we actually have some incentive for battery packs currently, and that would be actually the buy down of the Powerwall program. and the bring your own device, in which the bring your own device, I mean, you can go out and pick out whatever battery you would like as long as it's one of the approved ones, and we can actually reach it through Virtual Peaker, which Virtual Peaker is a software that we use to actually communicate with batteries, heat pumps, EV charge stations, and which we also do that with some hot water heaters, but we found that hot water heaters don't really give us the bang for the buck that based on the investment to actually be able to control them during peak demands. Whereas if we can actually roll back somebody's charger at their home for their personal EV, that's going to save some kilowatts, which that's going to free up some energy to put back on the grid. Also being able to tap the resource of your personal battery, whether it be one that you bought yourself or through our Powerwall program. Does that help, Catherine?
Somewhat. It sounds kind of complex. It sounds like it would be a good conversation to have when we're ready to purchase one.
Yep, it would be a great conversation.
Thank you.
Anything else here? You're welcome. So here's the interesting thing, and I'm going to let you digest the slide. So when I bought my plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, I bought a Chevy Volt. It actually has an oil change monitor in which, you know, when the oil gets dirty, it tells you when it's time to change it. So I had the car for like a year and a half, and I frequently, you know, being the gearhead from years ago, frequently would pop the hood, check the oil. Well, I really didn't think about the fact that the oil filter itself may rot off before I actually had to have the oil change, in which that's one of the downfalls. So I've actually decided that I have my oil changed annually now, just so that I don't end up with a year and a half of a metal container oil filter cartridge rotting off the vehicle. So from the standpoint of saving you money, I love the car. It's great in the snow, puts snow tires on all four corners of it. The only time I had an issue with snow was when the town actually plowed the end of my driveway, in which there was about a 3-foot drift, and I didn't get enough speed up to bust through it, so I ended up spending a little bit extra time shoveling out from underneath the car. But other than that, I've never been stuck with it, and I've actually enjoyed it a lot. The first year I had it, from May to September, I burnt 5 gallons of gasoline, which I think is huge. Questions?
What kind of car did you say you have?
I bought a Chevy Volt, not a Bolt, Volt with a V, which was the hybrid. And part of the reason I did that is I was a little bit reluctant. Today, would I go out and buy a 100% electric vehicle? Yes. But I had to first, lack of better terms, dip my toe in the water to make certain it wasn't too cold and find a comfort level with it. But I absolutely love the car, in which it's got 50,000 miles on it now, which I keep getting asked by friends, when are you going to get rid of that? I have no idea. I'll drive it until it falls apart, maybe. Questions? So here's another example of a commercial project that we did, in which we incentivized 14 large commercial heat pumps in a location in which we offset quite a bit of fossil fuel and reduced some carbon substantially, in which this is a really good example of what we can do in the commercial environment. And bringing Efficiency Vermont to the table helps a lot, because in many of these instances, we can actually look at it, and Efficiency Vermont may provide some efficiency dollars to actually do some weatherization that truly would allow the heat pumps and the customer to gain the benefit of putting in that equipment. And the ancillary benefit, as you can see, is you get air conditioning. Ski resorts. Who would have thought that they'd actually be making snow with electric snow guns as opposed to running a diesel generator to be able to power the electric snow guns and or some other fossil fuel source. It's worked out very, very well. I'm trying to think of the name of the other ski resort that's owned by Middlebury College, the Snow Bowl. The Snow Bowl actually put in some electric snow guns as well, in which decent incentive for those, in which Efficiency Vermont also pitched in both those projects, and happy customers.
Yeah, Dan, more regionally, folks might be skiers up at Magic Mountain, and that was one of the first Tier 3 projects we did to convert them from diesel to electric air compressors for snowmaking.
Thanks, Chuck.
Sure.
So prescriptive measures, and these are more for on the residential side. To answer your question earlier, Catherine, these fit into the gamut of URI as individuals. And those numbers as of 7/31 will change slightly, in which Efficiency Vermont's rebates at point of purchase will drop by $150, correct, Chuck?
Yeah, I believe so, Dan. Numbers move all the time. I don't deal in that space too much.
Okay, and the $800 rebate from Green Mountain Power is still out there until the end of August. Ran into a few situations where when there was a $400 rebate from Green Mountain Power that we could actually write a custom project for a commercial business or a business, in which with the $800 rebate, it's very difficult to compete with that. And quite often they're getting more incentive with the $800 based on the volume of heat pumps that they would be installing than we could provide with a custom incentive. So here's a complete listing. I mean, I don't know if anybody has an electric lawnmower. I've had a Newton for about 15 years and I absolutely love it. Charge the battery and I can take care of about a little over a third of my lawn with the Newton only, in which especially the areas that you want to eliminate the grass being tracked back into the house after you mow the lawn.
So Dan, some of these incentives, do they have expiration dates?
So everything, all of the incentives that you're seeing right there now are through 12/31, with the exception of the $800 for the heat pumps, which that actually drops back to $400 as of August 31st.
So Dan, there is a question from Bill. Are there electric riding mowers?
We actually, yes, there are. And the Green Machine is one example, and there are a few others out there. If you actually surf the internet, there are a bunch of them out there. And if you're looking at it residentially and or commercially, if you can calculate how much fossil fuel you would have avoided, we can look at it on an acreage basis and potentially provide some incentive.
So there's not currently an incentive program specifically for electric riding mowers, but if they work with you, that they can, you know, see about getting one. Is that what I'm hearing?
The only yes, we do have a incentive program for one in particular, and that's the Green Machine, in which we actually have a couple landscape companies up in the Colchester, South Burlington area that actually have switched their fleet over from, started out with gasoline, went to propane, and now they're actually using the Green Machine in a commercial world. So we created an incentive for that.
I had a question about purchasing. It just happens to be the time that we need to, in my own household, replace our mower, and we wanted to go electric. And are there, when we purchase it, because we're a border town, sometimes it's easier for us to purchase something in New Hampshire. Does that make a difference, or does it have to be a Vermont purchase?
So it doesn't have to be a Vermont purchase. The only instance you're going to run into with a Vermont purchase only is going to be the electric bikes. We actually have a group on our website that list, or I should say all of the entities are actually supporting our rebate for the electric bikes, because they're actually taking the $300 right off at the point of purchase, and we're sending the distributors or the dealers, I should say, the check for the $300. So it's just made it a little simpler. From the standpoint of the e-lawnmower, I mean, you could buy it online and still get your $75.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask about the e-bikes?
Yes,
I bought one last year, and I just ordered it online because that was the easiest way to do that. So are you saying with the e-bikes, there's only one type and it's got to be through that company, or would I be eligible?
no, there's a list of actual bike shops in the state of Vermont that are in our program, and they don't all sell the same brand. So hopefully the brand you're looking for is there, and or they can order the brand you want.
Well, I already purchased it. I bought it last year. I didn't know there were incentives. I got it last July. But it would have to go through, a bike shop for that incentive?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct. And also, one of the things that you're signing off on when you purchase an electric bike is the fact you're actually going to use that in lieu of a car or truck to drive yourself from point A to point B.
Yeah, done. Already done.
So electric forklifts, we've actually provided quite a few incentives. And then to answer your question, Margot, the commercial e-mower, there's on the very bottom there's $2,500 there. Custom projects, I mean, I won't talk about Riley Rink again, but I will talk about the coffee roaster over in the left-hand side, in which you wouldn't think that someone would actually use propane to roast coffee beans. Well, they did, and they now have an electric roaster, in which that's one of the projects that we were capable of funding, about 60% of the project. Questions? Share with Vermont Green. This has been very, very popular twofold. One, for those rate 6 customers, which are small business customers that have had a hard time because of COVID-19 making ends meet. We actually they can sign up to actually receive solar benefits from folks who have excess production, and this has worked out very, very well, in which you can sign up to receive, or you can sign up to give, and it's helped out quite a few folks, and it's very, very simple.
Can I ask a question on that?
Certainly.
Sorry, I keep interrupting here, but
No, that's fine.
we've had our solar now for like almost exactly a year, and I'm still not exactly sure how to measure our usage and then what happens with it after that. So I'm just wondering if there is a specific person or phone number I could call to just talk about this, and then also the program you just mentioned.
So the person you want to talk to would be Rick Perry, and you bear with me just a second, and I will give you his contact information. Well, while I'm waiting for that to search for Rick, any other questions? So there's actually 3 of us that are covering the state of Vermont, which I actually take care of, as I said, Route 4 South. Freeman Corey takes care of Route 4 up to Route 2 and the center part of the state, and Emily Eckert actually takes care of the northern tier of Green Mountain Power Service Territory, in which, as I said earlier, any projects that you can think of, any questions, thoughts, anything that you think that might fit into this program, I'd love to give it a sniff test and see if we can help, as opposed to find out later that we could have helped. And the way everything is written by the state and what we need to document and the way we need to process it is we actually need to prove that we helped you make the decision to move to electrification. So in the instance, Catherine, of your bike, unfortunately, we can't help you there. But if you buy a second one or upgrade yours, we still can help.
Okay, that might happen.
Chuck, anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so, Dan. I think you did a great job. I guess I would just reiterate a point you made earlier that while we both have, when I say both, Efficiency Vermont and Green Mountain Power have pretty robust websites with a lot of information on it, we also have call centers that are staffed and ready to take calls. So, you know, whether it's you or your friends or colleagues, family members that are contemplating energy investments, please pick up the phone. You know, we have people to talk you through the options.
Can you give a number for that?
Efficiency Vermont's number is 888-921-5990.
Thank you.
I have a question maybe for the whole group. Again, my family is looking to get an electric mower. I'd love to convince all my neighbors to get them too, since I live in a village and it gets very loud, but that may be in the future. But I'm just wondering, and Dan, I recognize that maybe you might not be able to answer this, but maybe someone in the collective group, you know, when we look up reviews online for electric mowers, they're kind of all over the place and often very contradictory. And I'm wondering if anyone has any recommendations on where I can find reliable information on electric mowers, or if they have a brand that you have experience with.
If you don't mind, I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now because I was actually going to, for some reason, I can't pull up Rick Perry's information on my phone, so I'm actually going to stop sharing and I will look it up.
And Cal, thank you. He just provided a thing in the chat to my question, so I appreciate that.
Can I ask an additional question about that? I had one of those mowers, I can't remember, a while back that they were pushing, they were orange. Was it a Neutron? I can't remember. But the batteries are what always went, and they just didn't work very well, and I stopped using it. Can you say something about the battery for this? It's an Ego. Is that what the recommendation was? I wonder if you can say something about the battery usage, ease of use, and shelf life.
So my personal Newton, I bought 2 batteries with it when I bought it many years ago, in which I've bought 1 battery since then, in which I think I've had it for about 15 years. And it's all about how harsh you treat the battery and how frequently you recharge it. And I'm not guaranteeing that, you know, everybody would see that same benefit or the same life cycle out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, it goes back to, you know, how do you treat it?
Yeah.
Bill?
Dan, I'd like to go back to the slide about business innovation for a minute and just ask a question. The Windham Energy Committee and a couple of other energy committees in our area have been having conversation about trying to start a community solar array, community solar project, probably something between 100 and 150 kW on a piece of land owned by a private person. And it turns out, in conversations I've had with a number of commercial solar companies, that these medium-sized projects are not very lucrative for the for-profit commercial folks. And actually, in one of the conversations, a couple conversations I've had, the suggestion came up that would it be possible to create a nonprofit corporation that was the owner and manager of a number of community solar projects, something along the lines of the way, let's say, the Nature Conservancy owns a bunch of land and manages it and holds it in trust, not for profit. But we're having a hard time figuring out how to make a business model work for these modest size community solar projects. I've had a number of conversations with solar companies who say that it's just not profitable for them to get into community solar on that sort of medium scale. They like to do bigger projects where they've got more margins and can make more money. Any thoughts about that? I mean, I'm really searching for creative ideas about how to try to get a nonprofit community solar operation off the ground.
So I don't have actually any expertise with that. I could probably put you in touch with the same person, who would be Rick Perry, but Jim, you may be able to share a little bit of light on that, Jim Hand.
Well, yeah, I mean, my sons and I do projects of all different sizes. From the developer's side, the one issue that always comes is that when you're in a community situation, you have multiple, meaning you might have 10, 15, 20, 25 people involved in, say, a 150 kilowatt project. I hate to use this word, but it's a little bit like herding cats in keeping everybody focused and on the same trail to get a project completed. That's why I'll call commercial developers like to deal with, 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe entities at that scale, when you're talking 100, 150 kilowatts. I suspect that's generally what you're finding or hearing. That's what we feel on our side of the table. I'm glad to visit with you to talk about a possibility either for ourselves or just to give you some information about what we run into. I'm sorry, I missed your name, and if you wish, my name is Jim Hand. My email is jimehand@gmail.com. And we do everything from, 15 kilowatt to speed projects. And again, I'm not trying to sell us, but I'm glad to give you information, maybe try to answer some of your questions.
I appreciate that. And I definitely will be in touch with you about that.
Okay.
So one thing I can share is anything over 150 kW, you're actually going to have to apply for a purchase power agreement, and that'd be an agreement with Green Mountain Power and the entity as to what rate we're actually going to pay for the production. So if you're south of 150, then you fall into the regular state regs, and if you're north of that, it will be a purchase power agreement. So, and I'm going to give Rick Perry a heads up that he may be getting some calls, but Rick's number is 802-770-3211. And 90% of the time he can answer questions commercial as well as residentially, because he deals with solar every day, all day.
Thank you both.
You're welcome. Anything else? Greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone today. Hopefully I did teach you something, and hopefully you utilize that. Feel free to reach out at any point in time. I still am traveling throughout Southern Vermont. As a matter of fact, next week I'll be in Chester. Last week I was in Wilmington. The week before I was in Brattleboro. So proper PPE and social distancing, we're still moving forward and doing our job. Ideal situation is to go into a factory setting or something like that, possibly during shift change or during a break where there isn't a lot of folks, so we can actually walk through and get a good sense as to what's going on and how we can help the operation. And probably 9 times out of 10 in that situation, I'll actually bring someone from Efficiency Vermont along with me so that we actually have both eyes and ears on it. And when we walk away, we'll actually put our heads together and figure out what makes the most sense, because there's some things, as Chuck said earlier, that Efficiency Vermont can provide incentive for, some things we can. And on occasion, we may turn it into one project for Efficiency Vermont or one project for Green Mountain Power, or a blended project for both. We're all about trying to provide the most incentive that we possibly can for the customer.
Thank you very much. It's been very, very helpful.
And Dan, thank you for your presentation and for sharing these different programs that are available for residential and businesses in Green Mountain Power's territory, and just a little bit about Green Mountain Power's portfolio and work in this energy efficiency realm. So if you have specific questions for Dan, you know, I'll make sure that when I send the follow-up recording that his contact information is also included in that, and he also provided it a little bit earlier. But thank you all for coming, and if you have any specific questions, I want to formally end the program now, but if you have a specific question or two that you want to ask Dan, we can stay on, but I just want to acknowledge that we are getting close to 1 o'clock, so that if people need to leave, they can. I also put up in the chat button, or in the chat link, a link to a very short survey. Just if you have any feedback about today's program or ideas for programs that you'd like to see, I would love to hear those. So if you have a chance just to follow that link, and it'll take probably 2 minutes, that would be really greatly appreciated. So thank you all for coming today.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.